Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all having a great day. Thank you very much for joining this second part of the webinar on economic efficiency. Before we get started, again, let's just have a quick sound check, video check, and a PPT check. Let's call it this way. So can you all hear me loud and clear? Can you all see me? Can you all see the PPT? You should see the webinar overview, part A, part B. Is this okay for everyone? Good. You see, I have invested in a new mic. Look at that. So you can hear me with my very clear voice, much better. Okay, so I assume most of you attended the first webinar yesterday, part A. I introduced this opening activity, Robinson's dilemma. Gave a very broad definition of economic efficiency, and then we focused on productive efficiency in the economy. We used the production possibility curve to illustrate it. Productive efficiency within a firm, we use the ATC curve to illustrate it. And then we focused on allocative efficiency. And to introduce this concept, I defined total surplus, and I just explained that allocative efficiency is simply when total surplus is maximized, which is the case when the marginal benefit of consumption is equal to the marginal cost of production. So that's pretty much what we did yesterday. Today, we will talk about the trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency. And I will give you a few examples that you can use to support or to illustrate this trade-off. We will talk about Pareto Optimality, even though there is not much to say. You will see that this is really straightforward. And then we'll spend most of today's webinar talking about strategies to review economic efficiency with your students. After you have covered the content, what can you do to make sure that they have acquired the skills that are necessary for them to succeed when they will take the examination. And after that, this is going to be the last stage of this. We will keep some time to have this Q&A session. So if you have any questions, make sure you can write them on a piece of paper throughout this webinar, and then you can ask me these questions at the end. Okay? Let's do that. So static versus dynamic efficiency, that's the first thing that we are going to do today. All right, so first, I will define what we call static and dynamic efficiency, and then we will go back to that picture so you can understand why this picture is a good illustration of the trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency. So in economics, static means at one point in time. It's like a photograph, one point in time. And dynamic, again in economics, means over a given period of time. So the difference between static and dynamic would be the difference between the short run and the long run. That's usually what we say. Static efficiency is efficiency in the short run, and dynamic efficiency is efficiency measured over a longer period of time. So that's what I explain here. Static efficiency at one point in time, dynamic over a given period of time. So yeah, but usually the definition that we give, because it's an easier definition, is just stating that static means in the short run and dynamic in the long run. So when you look at this picture here, you can see why there might be a trade-off between efficiency in the short run and efficiency in the long run. Sorry guys, somebody's knocking at my door. I'll be right back. Sorry guys, this was the yogurt delivery. Okay, so why is this a good example of a trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency when you see this poor kid who is eating vegetables? This guy doesn't seem to be very happy, all right? He would probably enjoy eating hamburgers or junk food or anything that would be more unhealthy better than just eating broccolis, carrots, and beans, which means that if you look at efficiency over the short run, then forcing this kid to eat these vegetables is probably not efficient. But over a longer period of time, if you take into account the fact that eating this, having this type of diet, healthy diet, will make sure that this kid will be in better health in a distant future, then sacrificing his satisfaction today, forcing him to eat things that he might not enjoy today, could actually be dynamically efficient over a longer period of time. And what you can do with your students is to ask them, is there anything, do you have any example from your life in which you do something today that makes you unhappy, that you do not really like, but you do it anyway because you know that this is something that is going to benefit you over the long run, in a distant future, for example. And this is a good way to introduce this trade-off between static efficiency and dynamic efficiency. So diets are very good examples. We sacrifice the pleasure of eating junk food because many of us, we enjoy the taste of junk food. So it's something we sacrifice in the short run. It's a loss in the short run, but this loss today is going to give rise to benefit in the long run. There is the example of physical exercise that you can use. When we run on a treadmill, many people don't really enjoy that. It's exhausting, we are sweating. The only thing that we want is for the pain to stop, but we do it anyway because we know that in the long run, this will provide long-term benefit. So this is another example of the trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency. And I'm sure you can come up with many other example. Doing homework, of course, but doing homework is a bit different because it's not really their decisions, right? They have to do it. So when you are forced to do something, it might not be a good example of that you can use because, again, economics is about decisions. But as a student, you really have the choice to choose not to do your homework. Well, you could, but you would be punished in this case. So try to think of other examples. You can ask your students. I'm sure they will come up with many additional examples of trade-offs between static and dynamic efficiency. Okay, how about examples more specifically related to economics? We'll see that. So roughly speaking, static efficiency is efficiency in the short run and dynamic efficiency in the long run. So yesterday we talked about allocative efficiency and productive efficiency. And you see that we never really talked about time. We never really talked about cost or benefits that could arise in the long run, simply because there was no time. When we talk about productive efficiency, allocative efficiency, these are static concepts of efficiency measured at one point in time. Okay, so productive and allocative efficiency are static concepts of efficiency. And the problem with static and dynamic efficiency is that very often there is a trade-off between the two, which means that the decisions that you will make that would be efficient from a static perspective might not be compatible with decisions that would be optimal over a longer period of time. Yeah, that's what I write here. Achieving static efficiency may not be consistent with achieving dynamic efficiency. So how about some examples? The example that I like the most to illustrate this trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency is the example of crop rotation. So I copied the definition from Wikipedia because the students, they might not know what we call crop rotation, but basically it means that every year you will grow different cereals, different vegetables over a given piece of land just to make sure that the nutrients will not be depleted over time. If you just keep growing the same cereal over the same piece of land, the nutrients are going to be exhausted in I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years, and then you will not be able to grow anything on that particular piece of land. So one way to make sure that the productivity, the fertility of your soil can remain pretty high over a longer period of time, what we can do is to rotate crops. Every year we grow something different that is going to use different nutrients. So the fertility of my soil will remain, let's say, constant over time. It will not decrease. Why is this a good example of static versus dynamic efficiency? Well, when you think about it, let's just consider two cases. What if I only care about making as much profit as I can this year, okay? If I want to make as much profit as possible this year, my best option, what I should do, would be to grow the crop or the cereal. Let's just say we grow cereals, the cereal that is the most profitable, okay? That's what I should do. And if I'm only interested about the short-term consequences of my actions, I should just grow the most profitable crop year after year. But if I want to make sure that my soil remain fertile, productive over the longer period of time, I might be better off growing a crop today that is not the most profitable one, okay? Profitable one. Let's say that growing corn is the most profitable option and growing wheat is not as profitable. But if I want to achieve dynamic efficiency, I might have to alternate between growing wheat and growing corn, even though wheat is less profitable, simply because I want to maintain the fertility of my soil. So I think this is a good example of achieving efficiency in the short run and achieving efficiency in the long run. So you can, once you have explained what crop rotation is to your students, you can ask them to list the main costs and benefits, what's good about implementing crop rotation, and the main benefit is that it prevents the depletion of nutrients in the soil, and what are the possible costs, and of course your profitability in the short run might be reduced by the implementation of this practice. Okay, so that's one example that you can use with your students. Another example is sustainable development. Sustainable development, you have the definition from the Brundtland Commission: development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Again, why is this a good example of the trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency? Simply because if we don't care about future generations, if we only care about the short run, then in this case, we could exploit as much natural resources as we want, pollute the atmosphere and generate greenhouse gases as much as we want. And this might actually be profitable in the short run, because if we do that, we can enjoy a higher rate of economic growth. We can increase the rate at which a country will develop itself, create more income. So in the short run, if we don't care about future generations, if we don't care about protecting the environment in particular, current generations might actually benefit from it. But future generations, they will suffer from the behavior that we have today. But if we look at the longer run, if we want to achieve dynamic efficiency, we need to protect natural resources and the environment in general. So future generations are able to meet their own needs, but this might lead to a situation where we achieve static inefficiency, where today the current generations will be made worse off because they have to sacrifice themselves for the future generations. That's another good example of the trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency. And you can, same thing, for each example, ask your students, what are the main benefits of sustainable development? What are the main limitations? Main limitation, of course, is that economic growth today may be slowed down. Last example, and this is usually the one that is, let's say, expected in during the examinations. It's about innovation. So I have a few slides about dynamic efficiency and innovation, simply because innovation is also an example of a trade-off between static efficiency and dynamic efficiency. So why is that? Simply because implementing or introducing an innovation is not something that is easy. Let me just give you one example. In the pharmaceutical industry, the average time it takes for a lab to introduce a new drug, a new medication, is 12 years. It takes on average 12 years for a pharmaceutical company to make research and development and finally apply for a patent. Okay, so it's very long and it's very expensive. The average cost is $1.2 billion US dollars. So when you think about it, if you have a business, if you have a pharmaceutical company that focuses too much on the short run, that cares too much about the costs and benefits that will be generated in the short run, well, this pharmaceutical company will not invest in research and development because it's a risky activity, because it will take 12 years before they can actually benefit from their investment. They don't even know if they will be able to succeed. They don't even know if perhaps a competitor will introduce an innovation before they do. So this is why innovation, and especially investments in research and development, is a good example of trade-offs between static and dynamic efficiency. Some businesses who care too much about the short run will not sufficiently invest in research and development and will not sufficiently contribute to technological change. That's what I explained here. Dynamic efficiency acknowledges that the state of knowledge and technology changes over time. As such, it takes into account the rate of investment in research and development projects aimed at introducing process or product innovations. And this really is about how much we discount the future. Remember, discounting the future basically means how much weight do we assign to future costs and benefits. And some economic agents, they do not sufficiently value, they do not put sufficient importance to future costs and benefits. In this case, we say that they overly discount the future. They discount the future too much. We sometimes say that these economic agents are myopic because they do not see very far in the future. So in this case, these economic agents, they will only see the cost that they have to pay today to engage in research and development, and they will not see the benefits that they can receive in 12 years from their research and development investments. So if they do not sufficiently invest because of that, because they overly discount the future, we will say that they are not dynamically efficient. What they do today might be efficient from a static perspective. They might be able to make more profit today if instead of investing in research and development, they choose to invest in advertisement. It's probably more profitable in the short run. So investing in a new advertising campaign might be efficient from a static perspective, more profit today. But if the innovation can lead to market power and a lot of profit in 12 years, investing in innovation might be efficient over the long run in a dynamic perspective. Okay, good. I will skip this. You can talk about the relationship between dynamic efficiency and market structures, but this is something that I usually discuss when I talk about monopoly, advantages and disadvantages of market powers. So you can introduce it right here, but the kids, they have not yet studied different market structures, monopoly, at least not in A2. So it's probably better to leave this aside, but if you want to introduce the relationship between dynamic efficiency and market structures, you can do it right here. Okay, yeah. And then last thing that you can do with your students is to talk about patents. So same thing, some of them might know what this is, some of them might not. So it's always good to remind them what a patent is, an intellectual property title. And you can have a debate or discussion in class about the costs and benefits of patents. And again, it's a great example of trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency. Of course, the main advantage of a patent is that it gives incentive to innovate, because the business, they spend a lot of money in research and development. And if they know that they will be able to apply for patent, they know that they will be able to keep the benefits of their innovation, that they will benefit from a market power from which they will be able to extract a lot of profit or generate a lot of profit. So that's the main benefit of a patent. But of course, there is a cost, because in order to create these incentives to innovate, you have to give a market power to the innovator, a monopoly power to the innovator for some time, usually 15 to 20 years. And we know that market powers are a cause of market failure, that the market will be allocatively inefficient as soon as the seller is price maker. So I think it's an interesting conversation to have at that time of the syllabus, to talk about intellectual property, because it's absolutely related to efficiency. So we are right in the topic. So yeah, good. Any questions about dynamic efficiency? Any questions about the trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency? Can we move on? Okay. Right, so the last piece of content that we have to teach when we go through efficiency is the concept of Pareto Optimality. But really, there is not much to say. There are just 2 or 3 things that your students must know, so I'll just go through that very, very briefly. I like this quotation from Amartya Sen. A society can be Pareto optimal and still perfectly disgusting, which really is, and you can actually use that as an opening activity. You can ask your students whether they believe that achieving efficiency is always fair. If we have an allocation of the resources that is efficient, we achieve economic efficiency, then can we conclude that it is fair? And of course, the answer is no, for one simple reason. Efficiency is an objective concept. It does not depend on opinions or value judgments. You can objectively, using the definitions, determine whether efficiency has been achieved in an economy or in a market, no problem. But obviously, equity or fairness is something that is highly subjective. Each of us can have a different understanding or idea about what is fair and what is not. And in particular, it's perfectly possible that you achieve an allocation of the resources that is economically efficient, but that is extremely unfair. And in particular, for those who have studied economics at the university, you might remember that it's perfectly possible that in a general equilibrium model, that you would have a situation where one economic agent is given all the resources, and you could conclude that this allocation of the resources is economically efficient. But in terms of fairness, of course, it is more than questionable. Most people would agree to say that If you just give all the resources to one economic agent, this might be very highly unfair. Okay, so I think it's interesting to have this debate, efficiency on the one hand, equity on the other hand, and usually they actually don't go along very well. Policies that are aimed at improving efficiency tend to reduce fairness or equity, and policies that are aimed at improving fairness tend to decrease efficiency. And that's mostly why we have political parties. So really, to oversimplify, usually right-wing political parties, they prioritize efficiency, and left-wing political parties, they tend to prioritize fairness. But again, I am oversimplifying here, of course. And then each political party has its own weighting of fairness versus efficiency. It's extremely difficult to achieve both at the same time. And later in the syllabus, I discuss this in further detail. I give examples of different policies that improve fairness but reduce efficiency, or vice versa. Okay, but it's too early for that. So Pareto optimality, it's actually quite different from everything we said before, simply because when we study allocative efficiency and even productive efficiency in a market, we are in a setting that we call a partial equilibrium setting, or it's a partial equilibrium model because we focus on one market and we ignore everything else. Okay, we ignore what is going on in other markets. But Pareto optimality is a concept that comes from the general equilibrium model. So these are really two different theoretical frameworks. So that's why it is sometimes difficult to connect Pareto optimality with the concepts of allocative and productive efficiency. It's sometimes a bit difficult. It's really a different framework. So how do we define it? It's a very simple definition. In an economy, it's never in a market, it's always in an economy, general equilibrium model. Pareto optimality, or we sometimes call that Pareto efficiency, is achieved when it is not possible to reallocate scarce resources so that at least someone is made better off. So you improve the satisfaction or the surplus of at least one economic agent without making anyone else worse off. That's a quite simple definition to understand. And your students need to know it. It's tested, especially in MCQs. There are MCQs where they need to know the definition of Pareto optimality. You can define, you don't have to, but you can define the concept of Pareto improvement. A Pareto improvement is a reallocation of the resources that improves the satisfaction of at least someone, at least one economic agent, without making anyone else worse off. Why it can be useful to define the concept of Pareto improvement? Simply because then you can say that, therefore, a resource allocation is said to be Pareto optimal if no further Pareto improvement can be made. If there is a Pareto improvement that you can do, then it means that your current allocation of the resources is not Pareto optimal. That's it. So your students need to know the definition, and they need to know that. That's important. There are MCQs that specifically test this feature, this property of Pareto optimality. Pareto optimality requires both productive efficiency and allocative efficiency. So again, the explanation is a bit, it's complex in the sense that these concepts come from very different theoretical frameworks, but here's how you can justify it. Here's how you can explain it to your students. If we did not achieve productive efficiency in the economy, then it means that we could produce more output, more of one good, for example, without producing less of another. And in this case, you have more output, so you have a bigger cake. This is what it means. You have a bigger cake, more goods and services produced in the economy. So in that case, It is possible to improve the situation of at least one economic agent without hurting anyone else. Okay, you produce more oranges, you can give the extra oranges to someone. This person will be made better off and nobody else is going to be made worse off. So that's why you need productive efficiency if you want to achieve Pareto optimality. And why do we need allocative efficiency? Because allocative efficiency is about maximizing total surplus. So it means that if you do not achieve allocative efficiency, you do not maximize total surplus, which means that there is a way to reallocate the resources in such a way that total surplus would increase. So again, you can see total surplus as a big cake. If you increase total surplus, you increase the size of the cake. And then for a given number of economic agents, you can improve the satisfaction of everyone else without damaging anyone. Okay? If you have one extra slice of the cake, you can share this extra slice with everyone. Nobody is going to be made worse off by that situation. So that's why Pareto optimality requires both productive and allocative efficiency. Is this equivalent to economic efficiency? I don't know. It really depends on how you define these concepts. Many different sources will use many different definitions, so I can't really tell you if Pareto optimality is the same as economic efficiency. To me, to my understanding, economic efficiency is really a partial equilibrium framework, whereas Pareto optimality is a general equilibrium framework. So I wouldn't say that they are identical, but we can say that Pareto optimality needs productive and allocative efficiency. Good. And to conclude, again, you can have this debate between efficiency and fairness. Is an efficient allocation of the resources necessarily fair? And there is a very interesting debate that you can have with your students. Good. We are done with the content. Any questions on Pareto optimality? Or do we move on? Okay. We will have a Q&A session anyway, right? So if you have if you forgot some questions, you can just write them on a piece of paper and then we'll save some time for that. Okay, let's move on. So first thing about reviewing economic efficiency. Oops. Mind maps. So here's the mind map that I have created, again, specifically for this webinar. So you can actually do that with your students. This could be a homework, this could be an activity that you can do with them. And I think it's great if they have mind maps for each topic that you teach. At the end of each topic, you should pause and just make sure that they have this type of mind map. This is going to help them save so much time when they have to review prior to the examination. So I made this one on my own, but you can again make your students work in groups. Each group will work on its own mind map, and then you can ask them to present their mind maps to the class. And then you can vote for which mind map is considered to be the best, and you can put it on the wall if you have some kind of bulletin board. And I think this is really something that is going to be beneficial to all your students. So you see, so I'm not going to go through everything, but what we have, so this is the mind map on economic efficiency. So Pareto optimality is a bit aside because again, it's quite different from everything else. Then there is the trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency. You see in black here, you have the definition. Each concept has a short definition besides it, very simplified definition. And then static efficiency, you can distinguish two types of efficiency: productive efficiency, allocative efficiency. Again, you have a definition of allocative efficiency. Here I remind that it's necessary to have both types of efficiency to achieve economic efficiency. And then we can distinguish productive efficiency for an economy or for a firm. I give the definition of each type of productive efficiency, and eventually I use the three main diagrams that the students need to know: productive efficiency in the economy, productive efficiency in a firm, and allocative efficiency. And here I have the formula of allocative efficiency in a market. So I strongly encourage you to use this type of mind maps. And it's actually better if you can build them with your students, not just if you give the mind maps to them, they might not really look at them. So it's better if you use some of your class time to build this type of mind map. So this document, I will send it to you so you can print it and give it to your students as an example. Yeah. And you see, in just one page, because this can fit on one page, you have everything. I really don't think there is more than that about efficiency. So we spent a lot of time discussing all concepts, but if your students know that, I think they will do very good during the exam. So mind maps, that's the first thing that you can do to help them reviewing. Next, okay, let me show you that. These key concepts cards, let me, yeah, do you see them? Do you see the key concept cards, everyone? Is this okay? You should, right? So what I've done here is I've put together these cards with the main concepts. So see, Pareto Optimality, definition. So you have several things. You have the definitions. You can have causes, for example, causes of productive inefficiency. What else? The diagram of productive efficiency. Example of the trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency. Okay, so a definition, diagram, example, causes. And then what you can do is you cut these concept cards, you put them in a box, and you go through your classroom and you ask each student to pick one. And then they have to, for example, if they pick dead weight loss definition, they have to stand and to give the definition of what a dead weight loss is. If they pick, for example, productive efficiency in an economy diagram, they will have to go to the whiteboard and to draw this diagram. If they pick static versus dynamic efficiency example, they will have to use an example, not an example that we have already used together, that would be better, to find an example of a situation that is a good illustration of static versus dynamic efficiency. And I've even added this last card, which is the card that nobody wants to pick. And you can do anything, but you could just say something like, if the student picks this particular card, this student has to sing a tune or something like that. Just to introduce some fun in your lesson. But yeah, making them sing a tune is usually quite funny. So yeah, this is also something, and this key concept cards cover pretty much everything. So it's a good way to review with your students and to make sure that they are engaged in your lesson, that they feel comfortable talking in front of the class, and even feel, I don't know if they will ever feel comfortable singing in front of the class, but could be fun. So that's also something that you can do with your students, these key concept cards. Then, mini whiteboards. So these are pictures that were took last year. All my students, they have mini whiteboards. And I really think that all economics teachers should provide or should make sure that the school provides mini whiteboards to their students. This is extremely useful, useful for many different occasions, of course, you can use these mini whiteboards to draw diagrams and to ask your students to draw diagrams. So in the in economic efficiency, there are three main diagrams that they must know: PPC, ATC, and allocative efficiency. So at the end of the lesson, you can ask each student, all your students, to draw these three diagrams one after the other on their mini whiteboard, and then they can just show you, they raise their mini whiteboard and they show you their diagrams, and you can very quickly identify who's got it right, who's got it wrong. And if they make a mistake, and this is a big advantage of using mini whiteboards, if they make a mistake, they can very easily correct it. They just erase their mistake and they correct it. If you make them draw diagrams on a piece of paper, it's usually very messy. If they make a mistake, they might have to do it from the beginning again. So yeah, use mini whiteboards. I strongly encourage you to do it. And of course, you can also use mini whiteboards. Is this my next point? Yes, for MCQs. So you can compile the MCQs from past papers that relate specifically to economic efficiency. So that's what I've done. I've already done that, and I've included the MCQs at the end of each of my PPTs with the answers. And instead of just asking one student, hey, what do you think the answer to that MCQ is? You just asked to all your students to write the answer on their mini whiteboards. And then again, as soon as they believe that they have the answer, they just have to raise their mini whiteboards, and immediately you can see how many of your students got it right, how many got it wrong. So in terms of information to you as a teacher, this really makes a big difference. So yeah, use mini whiteboards for diagrams, but also for MCQs. And students like that. Students, they usually find that it's fun to use mini whiteboards. So there will be very enthusiasts using these mini whiteboards. If you teach online, it's going to be a bit more complicated. It really depends on which softwares or which app you use for your online lessons. Some softwares have an integrated feature that allows you to ask to ask questions to your students, and they have to answer by A, B, C, D, and they have a limited time to answer these questions. You could, if they use a webcam, you could ask them to show their answer in front of the webcam, but I don't think this would be something very convenient. So yeah, obviously if you teach online from overseas, it's not going to be very easy to use mini whiteboards with your students. I guess, yeah, you could just ask them to send you private messages. If you use Zoom, you can just ask them to send you private messages with the answers. And for diagrams, I have taught online when I was in France at the beginning of the epidemic. And for diagrams, I usually ask the students to draw the diagram on their mini whiteboards or on a piece of paper for those who did not have their whiteboards at home. And then I ask them to take a picture and to send the picture to me. It's not ideal, but that's the best we could come up with. So obviously, to make sure your students are ready for paper 3, go through the MCQs, but also something that I think we should do as, yes, mini whiteboard, beautiful handwriting. You know that in the examination, paper 4 usually comes before paper 3. Paper 3 is typically scheduled in beginning of June, and paper 4 in May. So again, in my opinion, it's probably more effective or more rewarding to focus or to use more time to prepare your students for paper 4, spend more time on data responses, more time on essay questions, especially because it is a paper 4 is more challenging, and because it accounts for 70% of their A2 grade. So my advice would be, do not spend too much time on MCQs. They will have plenty of time after they are done with paper 4. They usually have 3-4 weeks. So do a few. It's important to go through some MCQs with your students so they know the type of question that they might face, but it's not useful to do all MCQs from past papers for the last 20 years, okay? So you have to find a balance. Usually I spend 20 to 30 minutes per topic to go through MCQs, and it is usually enough. Okay, so that's for MCQs. Then what do we have? What about essay questions? So there are two types of essay questions. You have 25 mark essay questions, single part essay questions, and you have these two-part essay questions, part 1, part 2. So because efficiency is the first topic of the A2 syllabus, it is still too early to ask your students to write full essays. If you look at single part essay questions, 25 mark essay question, they don't have enough, they have not studied enough to be able to answer these essay questions. Usually when there are essay questions about efficiency, 25 mark essay questions, and it's very common, almost every year there is one essay questions about economic efficiency. There are usually 3 things that the students must do in their answer. They must define, introduce efficiency, and this is exactly what we have done yesterday and today, the different concepts, the definition, the diagrams. Then they have to talk about market failures, and then they have to talk about government intervention to fix those market failures. This is the typical structure of essay questions, 25 mark essay questions about economic efficiency. But again, because we have not yet talked about market failures and we have not yet talked about government intervention, they are unable to write the full essay. And I will show you what you can do with them. So if you have a look at this 7 examples that I have here, you see that students are not ready yet to answer this type of essay question. There might be some two-part essay questions for which they might be able to write either part A or part B. So for example, if you look at this one, the second question, 2A, you see that question 2A, your students do have enough information to answer this part, to answer this 12-mark question, because this really is about introducing efficiency, different types of efficiency. So you could assign this essay question, just 2A, just part A. Same thing for the first one about the PPC. They do have enough information, enough knowledge to answer this essay question, part A, but you see that in both cases, part B is something that they have not yet studied, so it's too early to assign this type of essay question. So you could assign part A of some essay questions from past papers, but not the entire essay. Be mindful. There are many examples simply because, again, every year there is one question almost every year about economic efficiency. And when you think about it, paper 4, this for the essay, there are only 8 types of essay questions that are very commonly asked to the students. So 7 types of essay questions, so you can prepare your students for each of these type of essay question. Okay, how about homework? What type of homework can you assign to your students? So I will give you 3 examples. 3 examples of homework. First, what I like to do is to ask your students to write a 500 word, so that's the maximum amount, could be anywhere between 400 and 500 words. A 400 to 500 word summary of what there is to know about economic efficiency. So a summary about economic efficiency. What do we call economic efficiency? Allocative efficiency, productive efficiency, the diagram, and so on. Why? What's the objective? The first objective is to get your students to learn how to be both concise and exhaustive. So concise is to say a lot with very few words, to identify what is really important, to prioritize, And exhaustive means that we don't forget anything important. It is a skill. When they write essays, they have to make sure that their essays are not too long, because if it's too long, they will not have time to answer, to complete the paper on time. And they have to be exhaustive, then to identify what are the critical points, the key concepts that they must explain or introduce in their essay. I think this homework is particularly interesting to prepare your students to answer this single part essay question. Because as I said, usually when you answer these 25-mark essay questions about efficiency, the first paragraph or the first part of your essay is pretty much a summary of what is economic efficiency. So it might be less than 500 words. Yeah, perhaps it's going to be 300 to 400. But this is usually the first thing that the students must do when they choose this type of essay question. So that's why I think that this homework A, when they write a summary of economic efficiency, is something that will be useful to prepare them for paper 4 if they want to pick an essay question about efficiency. Give them 3 to 5 days, no more than that, at least 3 days, so they can provide a high quality work, but no more than 5 days. Otherwise, they will just procrastinate. And I will send you the key. I will send you the summary, a 500-word summary of everything there is to know about economic efficiency. So you can ask your students to do the work, and then you can just print the key that's just an example, right? That I have written myself, and you can just give it to them so they can compare their work with mine or yours, whatever you want to tell them. Okay, so that's one possibility. Okay, I have one suggestion. The question selected could have the CAE paper 4 and question number. Okay, absolutely. You mean right there, right? You mean here I have not included the information about what year and what version of the paper it was. You're right, absolutely. I could do it. I could do it. The reason for which I did not do it is probably because I was a bit lazy or because there was not enough room on the PPT and I wanted to include as many essay questions as possible. But yeah, I think this would be an improvement if I could do that. Absolutely. Thank you for your comment and suggestion. Okay, so homework A, you can do that. Homework B, you can, oh, you see, I've done it there. You can just assign this essay question from past paper, but you see this is just part A. This is actually the one we had over here, I believe. A country moved, is this one? Yeah, a country moved from a point within its PPC to a point on its PPC, explain what is meant by economic efficiency, analyze what happened to economic efficiency, blah, blah, blah. They can do that, even though you have only taught them one topic about economic efficiency. Everything that is expected, like everything that is in the mark scheme, have been taught about efficiency. So this is just half an essay question, but this could be preferable to assign this type of essay question simply because it is directly taken from past papers. Okay, so give them a word limit. It's important. They have to learn, and 400 is like a pretty high limit. It's okay if they only write 300 words. It depends on how fast they can write, how efficient they are, but you need to monitor that their essays are not too long or not too short. Important. Again, make sure they are concise, that they don't repeat themselves, and make sure they are exhaustive, that they don't forget anything important, and give them 3 to 5 days. That's enough. Homework C, that's an essay question that I created. Discuss the extent to which an economy which allocates most of its scarce resources to the production of capital goods is likely to achieve economic efficiency. And I think that's an interesting question because there is a lot you can say. You can talk about whether or not you may achieve productive efficiency. And in this case, there is nothing that may prevent you from achieving productive efficiency. But in terms of allocative efficiency, if you allocate most of the economy's resources to the production of capital goods, well, it means that there will be very few consumer goods, and people today, the current generations, might have very low standards of living. So allocative efficiency, remember, it's a static concept. Efficiency today might not be achieved. It's likely that you will have allocative inefficiency simply because you can't eat machines for breakfast. People need consumer goods to be able to satisfy their needs and wants. But from a perspective of dynamic efficiency, it might actually be good, right? Because if you allocate most of the resources to the production of capital goods, it means that you will increase your productive potential in the future. The PPC will shift outward in the future, which means that future generations might benefit from the current allocation of the resources. This will allow you to stimulate economic growth. So you see, there are so many things you can say. This is what I say, your answer should consider allocative, productive, and dynamic efficiency. There are many things that can be said about this essay question. So I do believe that that's an interesting one. Homework C might again need the knowledge of market failure. No, not necessarily, no. Why would you want to talk about market failure in this case? No, that's really about, can we achieve productive efficiency under such allocation of the resources? Can we achieve allocative efficiency, yes or no? And from a point of view of static versus dynamic efficiency, who's going to benefit the most from such an allocation of the resources? Present generations, future generations? I think there are many things that can be said. It's perhaps a bit beyond the scope of the syllabus, perhaps a bit difficult, but I just find that the content can be included in this type of essay question can be interesting. I don't know, could be a 25 mark. Perhaps a bit too much, 25, but it's more than a 12 mark, but it's less than 25, so you can just assign as many marks as you want. Yeah, you can just give them a word limit of 800 words. Again, that's a maximum, okay? It doesn't mean that they have to write 800 words. It means that you will stop reading at 800 words. And again, you can give them 3 to 5 days. Good. Then, how about the lesson plan? Yeah, it includes scarce resources, but well, first, the students are not expected to know anything about market failures in A2. They have studied demerit goods, public goods in AS, sure, but I think most of them would understand that the concept of market failure is not the focus, the main focus of homework C. Okay, so usually about lesson plans. Sorry, there is another question. So regarding long essays, English writing skills could be a hindrance also for students who come from certain education background. Previous practice of writing essays may benefit students. Students from non-CAIE or non-IB background might find that challenging. They might not know the structure of their thoughts properly. Yes, and my advice would be team up with your English teachers. If there are English or EAP teachers working at your school, and of course they are, work with them. For example, you assign an essay question, economics essay question, and then you talk to the English teacher and you say, could you use some of your class time to help the students write their essays? And in A2, again, I don't know how this works in your school, but in many schools in A2, the students, they don't take English exams. So it means that English teachers, they have some flexibility to adapt the content of their lessons to support your course. So do that. You don't have enough time to do everything. You can't teach English to them. You can't teach them essay writing skills and teach economics at the same time. You need help. And there are English teachers, use their help. I have organized webinars on essay writing skills. specifically. So, and I have some handouts on essay writing skills, in particular one PPT that is called How to Write a Fine Essay, with many advices. You can download all these documents from my website. If you just type webinar or if you type essay writing skills in the search box, you will find these documents, videos, PPTs. There is a PDF about how to write evaluative comments. Evaluations are usually difficult to write for students. So you can use all these documents, and hopefully this will allow you to help your students to write better essays. Other questions: to what extent do students need to have a grasp on market systems in answering a question on allocative efficiency? For example, one of the essay questions from 2016 exam mentions whether the market system can achieve allocative efficiency and references whether the government is potent in achieving this. Will students have to understand the dynamics of Keynesian and neoclassical thought on the efficiencies of government intervention and the distinctions between market structures, command economies versus free market economies? That's a big one. So when the students answer paper 4, it is assumed that they know everything about the AS syllabus. And of course, in AS, we study different types of economies: command economy, mixed and free market. So I would say that it really depends on the essay question. But so if you expect a general answer, I would say that yes, they need to understand the relationship between different types of economies and efficiency. What we've done so far, the content of this webinar was efficiency in a market system, in a free market system. We haven't talked about government intervention whatsoever. So we haven't talked about planned economy. We haven't talked about mixed economy at this stage. We gave definitions on how to achieve productive and allocative efficiency in a free market. So they need to understand what types of inefficiencies can be created by government intervention, something that we call government failure. And of course, they will need to know how government intervention can fix market failure in a mixed market system or in a mixed economy. So there are two things. They are the market failure and how governments can fix them. And there is government failure and how a market system can do better. So of course, it is important to teach both. And there is, within the A2 syllabus, there is a part that is dedicated to government intervention to correct market failure. This is in the third unit of the A2 syllabus, government microeconomic intervention. So this is about how a mixed economy could perform better than the market economy. And at the end of this third section on government microeconomic intervention, there is government failure, which is all about the limitation of the actions of government within the economy. So that this is at that time that students can learn why a planned economy or even a mixed economy can create inefficiency due to a poor or a inefficient government intervention. Regarding the dynamics of Keynesian and neoclassical thought, I don't think it's necessary. They don't need to know too much about the different schools of thought. They need to know what the difference between the Keynesian and the neoclassical ASAD model. Yes. They need to know the basic difference between these two schools. Yes. But this is mostly when we study macroeconomics. So I don't think it's very important for them to be able to relate the different schools of thought to the concept of efficiency. Efficiency in A2 is mostly a microeconomic topic, so I don't think it's necessary to include anything about the different schools of thought, unless you have super talented students who can actually connect these two concepts. All right, how about a lesson plan? So usually I don't do lesson plans. I should not say that, but that's true. Okay. Usually lesson plan is in my mind simply because I have spent a lot of time to design the PPTs. So I know how the PPTs are structured, the activities and so on. So I know what's going to be the structure of my lessons. But some schools might require their teachers to submit lesson plans, or you might find it beneficial to you. This might help you to pace your lesson, to structure your lessons. So for once, and again, specifically for this webinar, I have come up with a sample lesson plan about efficiency. Okay, title. So time allocated, you need at least 3 lessons. That's the minimum, in my opinion. I think it's okay if you want to spend 4 or 5 lessons. It's really up to you. That's the first lesson of the year, so don't rush. You need to make sure that your students build up some kind of confidence. So 3 lessons is really the minimum amount of time that you should allocate to efficiency. So I'm not going to go through everything, but I'm just going to identify the main things. So first, for each lesson, you should have a lesson title. So the first one is productive and allocative efficiency, with the objectives. What are the objectives of the lessons? The activities that you can do with your students to engage them. So for each lesson, I have provided a set of activities to make your lessons more enjoyable for everyone. And I've also included a section one step further. If you have like strong students, or if you want to go a bit beyond the syllabus, what can you do? So everything that is in the one step further section is not going to be tested for A2. So this is mostly if you really want to stimulate the interest of your students, or if you have some, and of course, if you have some time to cover these activities or this content. So that's lesson 1. I've done the same thing for lesson 2. So lesson 2 is dynamic efficiency and Pareto optimality, basically what we've done today. Same thing, what are the objectives? Activities, what can you do with your students to engage them? And again, one step further, to take your students to the next level. Again, I'm not going to go through everything. It would be boring if I started to read everything. But if you have any questions about some items in this lesson plan, send me a message and I'll be very happy to get back to you. And lesson 3 is really about economic efficiency. What are the objectives? What the students must be able to do? What are the activities? See, there are plenty of activities that you can organize with your students during your class time to make sure that the reviewing process is as enjoyable as possible. And well, for reviewing, there is nothing in the one step further section, simply because it is just about reviewing. Okay, so again, this document, I will send it to you. I will also send you the Word document so you can modify it, edit it. I will send you the PDF and the Word document, and hopefully this is something that is going to be useful for you and give you some ideas on how you can structure your lessons about economic efficiency. All right, I think we are almost done. Yes, we are. So before we go through the Q&A session, because I want to make sure that everybody is still there, let me just say that, okay, in 24 hours, just give me 24 hours, you can log in to this address, to this web page, okay, EconDoctor.com/efficiency, and you will find all that. So you will be able to download the video recording of this webinar, the key to homework A, the summary about economic efficiency, the mind map on economic efficiency, the PPT that you can use in class when teaching efficiency, the key concept cards that I showed you, the PPT used during this webinar, this one. Or actually I have it twice, okay, well, you will only have one. You will have the lesson plan on economic efficiency and also a PPT that you can print for your students prior to your lessons. So you'll have all that in 24 hours. And yeah, these resources, I hope they will be, you will find them useful when preparing your lessons. So that's the first thing. Second thing, Yesterday, some of you asked about how, is there a WeChat group where we can talk, discuss, find material. So of course you have the Cambridge group, but I think you already know this one. And this is the one that I created that is directly connected to my resources, my websites, and to me. And this is where I share information about future webinars, about uploads of new material on my website, and so on. So if you want to join this WeChat group, you just have to scan this QR code and you will be with us and you will not miss any information. So I'll give you 10 more seconds to scan it and then we move to the next slide. 10 more seconds, hurry up. I hope you have your phone besides you. Okay. Next thing, is this okay? Should be okay. Of course, you have your phone beside you. We all do. Is there any form of certificate of participation for this CAIE webinar? I can make one, but I don't think there is anything official from Cambridge. No, I think I will get some kind of certificate of appreciation because of course, I'm volunteering for this webinar. But I don't think the delegates will get any form of certificate. That's a good question. Next, super important, please do it. This is a feedback form. Same thing, you can scan it and this will connect you to a feedback form that I have created. So you can tell me what you thought about this webinar. If you enjoyed it, or what you liked about it, what you disliked about it, how you think I could improve it, how you think I could do a better job as a workshop leader. So this is very important to me. I very highly value your opinions and your feedback, your suggestions. So please, this is going to only going to take you 5 minutes, but please do it. Take 5 minutes of your time and I would be delighted if you could tell me what you thought. So yeah, that's about it. Is this the last one? Okay, so that's all, folks. No, not exactly, because we still have the Q&A session. But yes, please scan this QR code. Let me type the address because EconDoctor.com/ I think that's the one, feedback webinar. Should be this one. Let me just check if it's the right web page. Should be, right? Should be working. Yes, feedback webinar.html. Okay, that works. So yeah, please take some of your time to do it. I would very much appreciate. And again, tomorrow, be patient. I have already uploaded some documents, but not all. Of course, the video recording of this second webinar is not up yet. And the key to homework A is not up yet. The rest is already uploaded. Good. So that's all for me. Do you have questions? Anything I could help you with? So you can type your questions in the chat box, or you can just unmute your mic and talk to me directly.
One question.
Hi.
Hi. My question is, one time you said that in dynamic efficiency we can link it with market structures.
Yes.
Yes. So, but normally we teach that dynamic efficiency is only in monopoly they achieve the dynamic efficiency. So, how about the other market structure?
Okay, thank you for your question. Okay, so basically the idea about dynamic efficiency and market structures, it's about incentives versus ability. In very competitive markets, firms have a very strong incentives to innovate. Again, there are two types of innovations. You have process innovations, which is about your production processes. So you have an incentive to be innovative, to reduce your cost of production. If you can reduce your cost of production, you can benefit from a cost advantage. And in a competitive market, this is a very strong advantage. And in a competitive market, you also have a strong incentive to differentiate your product, because product differentiation decreases the intensity of competition, and you can raise the price if your product is different, and you can make more profit. And through innovation, if you introduce a product of better quality or a product with new features, it is one way you can achieve product differentiation. So basically, very strong incentives for firms to invest in research and development when they face a strong competitive pressure. But on the other hand, these businesses, when they operate in a competitive market, they are usually small businesses who do not make a very high profit in the long run. If we take the example of perfect competition, we know that all businesses make zero economic profit in the long run. So the point is that even though they have strong incentives to invest in research and development, they might not have the ability to do it. They might not have the funds required to invest in research and development. And something that is also interesting is that because they are very small businesses, they might not find it beneficial to make very long-term investments. Again, remember that in the pharmaceutical industry, it takes 12 years to innovate, simply because they might not be sure that they will still be there in 12 years. Many small firms that face a very strong competition, they might go bankrupt pretty quickly. So is it really a good idea to invest a lot of money in research and development that will only provide benefit in 12 years from now? Perhaps not. So basically, the point is that firms that operate in a very competitive environment, they have a tendency to discount the future more than firms that have a strong market power. These competitive firms, they care about surviving today. So they might not sufficiently innovate because of that. So then you could say, yeah, but even though they don't make profit in the long run, they might borrow these funds from banks, for example. But again, banks, they might be worried about the survival of this competitive firm, this very small firm in the long run, and therefore the bank might be concerned by the ability of the business to pay back the loan. So it might charge very high interest rates, at least higher interest rates than what it would charge to a much bigger firm, simply because this is going to be considered as a more risky loan than the case in which the bank lends to a monopolist, for example. So to summarize, in competitive markets, strong incentive to innovate, but the ability to find the funds necessary to the investment is questionable. They might be unable to finance their research and development project. In a monopoly, it's the opposite. They don't have a strong incentive to innovate, simply because they don't face any competition. You might see that as an example of X inefficiency, but they have the ability. They can make positive economic profit even in the long run. They might have the ability to borrow money from financial institutions at lower interest rates, simply because it is considered as a less risky loan. So you see, that's really the opposite. Lower incentives, but stronger ability. So at the end of the day, and this is what, I don't know if I conclude that. At the end of the day, it's difficult to tell. It really is difficult to tell in which market structure we are the more likely to achieve dynamic efficiency, in competitive market or in a concentrated market. It is difficult to tell because there is this issue of incentive versus ability. That's really what I explained to my students, and that's what I summarize here. So you can have a look at these PPTs, these two slides about the relation. Actually, no, there's just one. Firms operating in highly competitive markets typically have strong incentives to innovate, but they may not have sufficient resources to undertake R&D investments. Firms operating in concentrated markets, monopolists or even oligopolists, typically have sufficient resources to undertake R&D investment, but they may lack the incentives to innovate. Have I answered your question?
I have one more question because I have some really intelligent students in my class. So what if the student asks me that that means dynamic efficiency is included in economic efficiency, yes or no?
Yes, it is. But again, it really depends on the time horizon that you select to measure efficiency. If there are two ways you can determine, again, economic efficiency is about, do we allocate our resources in the best possible way? And the answer to that question depends on, okay, but over what period of time? Example, if you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, the way you would allocate your time today would be very much different. Okay, and you can tell your kids, if you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, you would probably not come to school today. You would probably do something that you enjoy more. So the concept of economic efficiency in itself, and if we want to assess whether or not we have achieved economic efficiency, depends on the time horizon that we consider. So yes, dynamic efficiency is included, as you say, in economic efficiency. It's just efficiency measured over a long period of time, whereas static efficiency is efficiency measured over a shorter period of time. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone have other questions? Okay, William, I see one here. Regarding left-wing and right-wing examples, that could not be a familiar concept to students in certain countries. Yes, it's true. But usually most of them in A2, they have taken other humanities classes, so they know how the political parties work, especially in the US with the Republicans and the Democrats. So I assume most of the A2 students, even in some countries, including China, know what a right-wing or a left-wing political party is. And if they don't know, you can ask their humanities or history or English teachers. Sometimes they do talk about political science. You can ask your colleague to explain to them the difference between a right-wing and a left-wing political party. Yeah. Any other example on efficiency and inequality? Efficiency and equity? You mean fairness versus efficiency? Okay, yes. So one example that I like is carbon taxation. So the carbon tax is a policy whose objective is to improve efficiency. CO2 emissions is an example of negative externality. So it leads to a market failure. There is an over emission of greenhouse gases. Therefore, there is a deadweight loss, and carbon taxation is meant to reduce the size of this deadweight loss. So the objective is to increase efficiency. But there are some reasons for which carbon taxation might be considered unfair. So it might decrease equity or fairness. One example that you can use is that usually, or in some countries that have implemented carbon taxation, people who buy gasoline people who use their car, they will have to pay more, simply because with the introduction of the tax, the price of gasoline will increase. So then you can say, okay, but then who do you think in society, who which type of people uses their cars every day and travel a lot by car every day? Do you think these are mostly high income people or low income people? And usually these are low income people, especially, for example, in France, we have this issue because high income people or households, they tend to live pretty close to their work. If you work in Paris, you will live in Paris because you can afford it. You have a high income, so you might be able to use public transportation or even to walk to your work every day. So in this case, you will not be affected significantly by the introduction of the carbon tax because you don't use your car. But who lives very far away from their work? Usually low-income people who can't afford to live in the city center because it's too expensive. And they live too far from the city to be able to use public transportation. So they have to take their cars every day. And they are the ones who will suffer the most from the introduction of a carbon tax. So you see that in this example, carbon taxation improves efficiency, but this is at the expense of equity. That's an example that I like because I think it's a clear illustration of this trade-off between efficiency and equity. Then you can do the other way around. You can find examples of policies that will improve, whose objective is to improve fairness, but that will decrease efficiency. And the easiest example is to talk about progressive taxation, income taxation. When you introduce progressive taxation, the main objective is to reduce income inequality, so to improve fairness or equity, but we know that progressive taxation leads to some inefficiencies. In particular, you can have the poverty trap, you can have tax avoidance, you can have tax evasion. So these are losses in efficiency that are the direct consequence of progressive taxation. So you see, more equity, but less efficiency. And there might be some other inefficiencies created by progressive taxation. Any other questions that you may have? Again, you can type your questions or you can just talk to me. No more questions? Okay, well, if you think of something after this webinar is over, you have my contact information at the bottom of the screen. Again, remember that there is a WeChat group. We show the QR code one last time. The WeChat group, if you want to be able to receive updates about new webinars. I organize webinars almost every day, so feel free to join. I will take a break for 1 week, but then I will resume these webinars. And feel free, and please do that. Complete the feedback form. Again, this is the first webinar that I organize with Cambridge. So your feedback really means a lot to me. So please take 5 minutes of your time to answer the few questions that I have. Yes, David, I'm listening.
I'm right. It's a very, very quick question. Thanks again for this webinar. I just wanted to know the extent to which you encourage your students to use practical examples in their exams. So if we take, for example, the topic of dynamic efficiency, looking at its relation to, say, oligopolist markets, would you encourage students to use real-life examples like Apple, how they've achieved dynamic efficiency inside their market to become such a market leader? Or is your advice mainly for them to stick to theoretical argumentation?
Okay, Thank you, David. So basically, when the students, they write an essay, every argument that they write, every point that they want to make should be structured or divided into 3 parts. First, they should state their argument, state their point. Then they need to explain it. So, okay, to do the analysis. And then they need to support it. And there are basically 2 ways they can support it. They can use diagrams and they can use examples. And of course, they need to be able to be practical, as you say, and to illustrate the point that they have previously stated and explained with examples. They don't have to use specifically the ones that I use myself. It doesn't really matter. And actually, it would be great if they could come up with their own examples, of course, as long as it is relevant. But I really believe that every argument should be supported with either a diagram or an example. Could even be both. So that's why every time there is a concept that can be supported by examples, could be real life example, or it could be just example that we create. It doesn't really matter. Of course, it's better if you can take the examples of a real world situation, real businesses and so on. But even if you can't, even if you make your own example, it doesn't really matter. But I strongly encourage them to use examples whenever they want to support their arguments. Absolutely, yes.
Thanks.
Anybody else has a question, comment, anything? Are we good? All right. Am I contributing towards the creation of dynamic efficiency of economic teachers? Yes, you're right. We have all, this is actually a good example. We have all sacrificed some of our weekend. Well, I hope that you enjoyed the time that we spent together. I hope that your next best alternative was not that was not too much valued. I hope you did not have to sacrifice too much. But yeah, it's a good example of a static versus dynamic efficiency. Attending this webinar today is perhaps not the most entertaining thing that you might have done on a Sunday afternoon, but hopefully you will enjoy the benefits of attending this webinar when you will be in front of your students in 2 or 3 weeks. So again, thank you everyone for attending this webinar or this series of webinar. Give me your feedback, and hopefully I will collaborate again with Cambridge to schedule further economics cafes. Probably the next one would be about market failures in general, and then about consumer equilibrium. So yeah, I don't know exactly when this would be, but I will keep you in touch, of course. All right, have a nice evening, everyone. Enjoy your week and see you later. Bye-bye.